You've heard the term triple threat, someone who can sing, dance, and act. But what do you call a woman who does all of that and raises two extraordinarily gifted children? Supports a husband who is the senior football advisor to one of NFL's most high-pressured teams, and still somehow creates a home that hums with health, harmony, and healing. You call her a triple threat squared. Dorothy Savage is a force of nature. She's walked the Broadway stage, she's walking the motherhood path, and she walks the talk when it comes to conscious, non-toxic, truly thriving living. This episode is about what it means to perform without losing yourself, to mother without martyring your identity, and to build a life that's not just glamorous, but is grounded. Because success isn't just about what's seen under the lights, it's about what's felt behind closed doors. And today we get a glimpse inside the Savage home and the sacred strength that holds it all together. This is Unbridled with Jenna Davis. All right, Dorothy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Congratulations on this project. That's quite an endeavor. It's exciting.
It's so much fun. I'm so excited about this. But I want to talk about you. So who is Dorothy Savage before motherhood, before marriage? Let's talk about who you are.
Oh gosh. Before motherhood and marriage, there's definitely a before and after, as we are. My childhood was really interesting. I had a very unique upbringing, had a very adventurous father who sort of raised us in pretty unique circumstances. I think that's why I'm pretty tough. I'm very close with my father. He's great. But we lived in some pretty unique situations. We're talking about homes without running water and in, bathtubs where you heated the water on the stove in a pot, like crazy stuff. And so it sort of raised me. He was always like building he had his own dream for a home. So he was always like building them while he could afford it. And we didn't have a lot of means. And so it was interesting. It was a very unique childhood. But it taught me to be pretty brave and pretty adventurous. And so I definitely grew up with that upbringing. I was always a dreamer. My father was a dreamer. My mother was a dreamer. My mother got sick whenever I was 13. She was diagnosed with cancer and then sort of battled that throughout my childhood. And she eventually passed when I was 19. That also was very formative in my life. Before, it was sort of, and I was the first person in my family to go to college. My dad, once I went to college, he had not even graduated from high school. He went back when he was 50 and got his GED and was the valedictorian of that. And then I was the baby of four. My siblings all went to college afterwards. And so we're a scrappy bunch. And I didn't have a traditional, sort of Polly Pocket upbringing, but I wouldn't change a thing. I think it's prepared me for a life of that's the reality where things change and change quickly. And I think a lot of like my friends that didn't go through conflict or challenges early on, sort of it slammed them in the face when they got into their late 20s or 30s or even 40s. And so I think before I was a pretty tough cookie. And now I'm a tough cookie who just sort of cries because I have children and they make me emotional and I'm preparing menopausal and I'm sort of like crying. My husband just turned 60. We just are like, what in the freaking heck is wrong with us? We're just crying all the time. Like everything makes you soft or emotional or, yeah. So I would say I was pretty scrappy before, and a dreamer, and that has never left. I just worry more because I'm a parent and I understand the world and the perspective of it. And I have people that depend on me. So, that changes us immensely.
And what led you into the entertainment industry? Let's talk about that. Because you're oozing with talent, as is your family. So Let's
You're
talk
so
about you though.
gracious.
You, when you sang, you had an album, you were in the Christian
Yes.
industry. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I,
How did
well,
you get there from your, your upbringing to that's a pretty big stage.
It's my family, all especially on my mother's side, but also on my father's side, everyone is many, I shouldn't say everyone. Many of them are some type of performer. My mother's entire family sang. My grandfather on my mother's side, he was a jazz musician in bars and all these things his whole life, and then he became a Christian, and then they went and traveled and sang. And my mother was a beautiful soprano singer. Her brothers and sisters, they all sang together. My grandmother on my father's side, she was like a vaudeville singer and sang with Gypsy Rose Lee and Tex Ritter. So it sort of, we grew up and at family reunions, everybody sang. People play cards at family reunions. We sang, so it was always in there. I grew up in church singing, but also, to be quite frank, I never thought that I would do this as a career. I always wanted to get to New York. I wanted to be an equine vet, but I wanted to like live in New York, and I wanted to be involved with the arts, but I didn't think that would be my career. But I wanted to go to Auburn to vet school, but my mother at the time was in the late stages of her disease, and so I stayed home and I got a full music scholarship to University of Mobile, and that changed the trajectory of my life. And so I'd always been in music, but I had not really thought of it as a career. And then I fell in love with it. And, the river sort of bent that way. And so I went with the river. I didn't fight it. And it's been the best decision of my life. And then I graduated from college and I came to New York with, it's a bizarre story. I was the first person in my family to graduate college, and my father was like, I know you got a degree in music. I know you want to be a performer in New York, but you're the first person in our family to have a degree. Shouldn't you go work at a bank or something? And I tried that for about 6 months, and it was horrible. And I felt, for me, for how I'm wired, I think there are people that are brilliant at that, and that's their gift and their talent. It's just not mine. Um, I ended up selling everything I owned in a yard sale and packed a lunch and came to New York on an Amtrak train in the middle of the night. And I had one paycheck coming through from the bank for like $370. And I packed like a little igloo cooler. And I met all these very interesting people on the train. I met one who was like an ambassador, this woman who was like a female ambassador to Amsterdam. She brought me lunch. She like gave me her card, on the train. She was like, I was like a 20 something clueless. I'm sure she was like, oh my God, what are you doing? Go back home, kid. But eventually it all worked out.
Yes, I would say.
Yeah. So yeah, I did that, and then I ended up auditioning, and then I would go back and forth and back and forth back to Alabama. And I was, working, doing small regional theaters, and I was back south actually for a Christmas holiday, and my husband saw me on a street corner at the Christmas parade,
In
and
Fairhope?
yes, and I
Oh,
was back home visiting. He was back home. He was working for the Baltimore Ravens at the time, and he saw me on a street corner and introduced himself, and that's how we met. And we were
and
both
that's the
not even living
Fairhope
there.
romance story right there that everybody's waiting for. Everybody goes,
Yeah.
everybody in
Yeah.
Fairhope
No,
wants that romance story.
it really, really was. And we both were off doing our own things.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, 10 years into his career while I was sort of like, I was 20, five, floundering around trying to figure out life. He was really entrenched already into his NFL career. And so we both found somebody that we were running the same pace, and so we could run beside each other and figure out life. And I was very independent, and I wanted someone who I was not looking for someone. um but the right person came along, so yeah.
When you started getting involved in the entertainment industry, which was your not your first passion, not what you had thought of as a child that you would do, but obviously you're gifted in that. So when you started going down that river, as you say, when did something awaken in you that made you go, this is it. This is good. This is me.
I don't know. I think that I still vacillate daily on that. I love design. I still love animals. I love, I'm still passionate about the same things that I was passionate about as a child, a little girl. I would get like poster boards and cut out magazines and design houses you know, and I, would play with stick horses, because my family didn't have the means to do that when I was younger. And so the same things that I was interested in as a child and obviously grew up singing are still the same things I do today. So I think that has saved me. And performing has led me to wonderful people that are loving and talented and brilliant. It has expanded my understanding of the world and understanding of people. Artists are unique, and it gives you a perspective on humanity and people who are living with their hearts on their sleeves, which I think is a beautiful thing. And there's days when I loved, like I said, I love to design. There's days when I think when I grow up, maybe I'll be a designer. Like I still vacillate and with those things, but I teach and perform, and I love teaching students. I mostly teach students who are doing this as a career. I haven't taught students who were not pursuing this as a career in a very long time. But that also fills me in a way that performing doesn't. And that's been a tremendous gift. So I don't think there was ever a time. That's probably not a perfect answer.
There's no perfect answer.
Yeah, there's not an answer that sort of puts a button on it, but I don't think I can put a button on it because I think that I'm still evolving. And this, again, has been a river that has taken me to a wonderful place in my life. And I think it's all been providential. But I also vacillate and think maybe I'll go another way at some point in my life. This will always be a part of my life, but maybe I mean, as the piano's, sort of right behind me. But I don't know. I don't think there's ever sort of a destination point when you're wired like me.
I
Yeah.
can relate.
Yes.
Definitely. Okay, so now we're into motherhood, and you have two extraordinarily talented kids.
Thank
Can we
you.
talk about them for a minute?
Sure. Well, of course, I'm a mother, so I'm like, oh, a chance to talk about my children gave me the stage. But my children are both in the arts. They're both pretty unique little individuals. My daughter is currently performing in an off-Broadway show with Betsy Wolfe called Joy the Musical. She's been
Yes.
involved with the project for about a year. And it's been an incredible journey. She started performing when she was around 7, and she's a gymnast. She's a competitive gymnast. So I didn't think that she was really going to go that route at all. But they say more is caught than taught. And so I literally was having a showcase at my theater that I had back in Fairhope one day for some of my students, and I had agents in town during COVID. And Honor was about 6.5, no teeth in the front, like scraggly, sort of a mess. And she just asked, she was like, "Can I sing at the end?" And she sang, and they ended up signing her. So, and then she sort of went from there. And then, it was pretty evident that she was gifted at it. She's a very serious human by
Right.
nature. She's a still waters run deep kind of person. She's not nearly as seemingly extroverted as I am. That's also just a skill set I have. I'm actually not an extrovert at all, but it is a skill set I have. And but she is, like I said, she's a competitive gymnast. She's training level 9. She's working enormous hours right now.
I
And
mean, training
so
level 9, if you don't know what that means, that's like, tell us what
challenging.
training level, yes, it's Incredible.
Training level
It's
9 is, I thought level 8 was going to put me in the grave. I mean, because just, they start you, I'm not going to say any of these things right. So if anybody watches this, that is, I'm a terrible technical terms, but it's the Yurchenko, I believe, where they flip the vault and, the bars get much more dangerous. And it's scary to me. And I always am at every competition, but I don't watch. I look at the ground and my husband films and I just pray the whole time. But it's high level and she's 13, she's going through puberty, your body changes. It's just a lot. But she's very, very brave and it is a challenging sport. And then she still, is dancing and training in that. And then obviously she's a performer and she's been very, very fortunate to work a lot professionally in the last couple of years specifically. And so it is a dance. But she handles it quite well. I won't glamorize it. There are days when she's like in tears because of just like, and then 70 to 80% of the time, she's joyful and loves every moment. But the other 20% were like, "Ah, this is really hard, which is humanity. And she's still a child and learning, but she is, a very honest performer, and we'll see where it goes. But right now, she's having the time of her life.
that is so
So
exciting. Okay, and how about Ever?
Ever is
Which he fascinates me. I love every time you share about,
he
Ever and his,
fascinates me.
oh, he's so,
He is a character. He is actually talk about a vaudeville performer. Like if that was in vogue right now, that would be him because he sort of does it all. He loves to dance. He's quite a little tapper and he's very, very musical. Much more musical as far as musicians go than Honor. She doesn't necessarily play an instrument. She's just not really. I mean, she never had time really because of dance and gym and the performing, but he takes to music very, very easily, and instruments. And he's quite an accomplished little pianist, and he's my academic. He's very funny, very comical. He has obsessions. He's obsessed with Michael Jackson. He really wants to be in the show MJ. And I keep saying, honey, you're really not the right kid for that cast. But he is not to be deterred. And so he like lays out his Michael Jackson outfits and puts on my husband's Under Armour glove and does the whole Smooth Criminal. And I'm like, honey, you're not going to be. The two shows he wants to be in most are MJ and The Lion King. And I'm like, those aren't for you, dear. So he's funny. He's funny and very, very smart and very inquisitive and very intelligent and keeps us on our toes. So, and he can do math better than all of us in the house. And he's just a funny little guy.
well, incredible. I love the videos that you share of him playing the piano. I mean, that's just, I'm like, he's 9, right? He's my daughter's age.
Yeah, he turned 9 in February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's 9, and I'm looking at my daughter in her piano lessons, and she's like, ding, 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 ding. And I'm like, oh, there's definitely a huge difference here in
Well, he can
in
play
skill.
by ear, but he also there's some specific title for his memory. I'm sort of sure there's a way that you describe the type of memory he has, but if he plays it once and sees it, that's it. Like can remember it. So he sees things in pictures. And so he's sort of like, it's not a photographic memory. There's another term for it. But if he sees the sheet music once, he remembers it and that's it. And he really doesn't look at it again, which his piano teacher sort of she's like, no, she's very strict. She's like his best friend. His piano teacher and his tap teacher are his best friends. But his piano teacher is extremely strict. And she's like, look at the music ever. But he's like, I'm done. I already memorized it.
I don't need it. I am right here. I've got it right here.
I got it. Yes.
So how with their extreme talents, which is what they are, they're not your normal talented kids. They are extremely talented kids. How do you nurture their talents and still protect their energy and their essence as a child?
Well, I will let you know when they're adults and hopefully don't end up on the therapist couch because I am still trying to figure that out daily, like any mother. I think that children by nature are extraordinary. And I meet so many extraordinarily talented children in this business and just in every other venue. But I think that my field, but I think I'm constantly trying to figure that out. And in my mind, somewhere I heard this. This is not me. I heard this. Like, don't try to find balance, try to find harmony. And that really plays in my mind. And so I work on that. I really think that I think I fail and succeed daily at that. I think that sometimes I get it right, and I think sometimes I really mess it up. But I do think that love covers an abundance of sins as a parent. And if we're dedicated and devoted and present, that sometimes that is the best we can do. And I think as long as they know that, then we're all going to be okay. you know?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything specifically that you just don't allow in your home?
Um, I'm very cognizant of the type. Well, we don't do video games. Now, if my son is at a friend's house or a buddy's house and they're playing that, I am like, go, go for it. I'm not like that, but I don't have it because I have two children who tend to get very hyper focused. And so I want to be really cautious about the things that I put in front of them that they could hyper focus on. And so we don't do video games. We also, are very cognizant of the type of television that they watch. I mean they go see shows, they go see all sorts of things. I'm not saying they definitely see things with mature content, but the rule is that there has to be redemption to it. There has to be a redemptive quality. My daughter happens to sleep walk in an extreme fashion. She got it from my husband, like walk, stand up on the heaters in our apartment and like beating on the windows in her sleep, like crazy stuff. So at my apartment in Manhattan, we're on the 10th floor. And so we keep all the child safety bars. Like they're old enough to not have them, but we keep them up because I have this like secret worry. But so because of that, I'm really sensitive about the content that they watch. And she is too, though. She's very self-aware in that. So it's really just more about like in regards to that, it's about trying to keep I think there's probably people I've had people comment that, your kids are so busy. When are they going to just be kids? I think that a lot of those people maybe aren't living in the reality of the world that we're living in. And I think that keeping kids busy with things that keep them exercised in body, mind, and spirit and creative is a necessary thing in the world that we live in today. Because you look at most kids that are bored and not completely active and involved in things, and they're on their devices or they're on social media. And that is, it's a deteriorator of their character and of their soul in so many ways. So, yeah, and very careful about those things.
I've made a couple of notes because it's things that I find fascinating and that I have personally experienced, and I would love your insight on it. I feel like within, I don't want to say there are highly gifted people, but a lot of times it's kids that they just find their gifts earlier than most because everybody has their thing. And when you find that, you're going to find your extreme gift and talents as well. So, but within that, I think the younger that kids find that, it lends itself to a deep amount of intuition within themselves that maybe they don't understand. Do you work with a lot of kids? Do you find that the ones that are in the field that you're working with and the entertainment, that they have a deeper intuitive level to them, and how do you help them understand that and use it for their craft, but also use it in their real life experience, because I think that can be a little overwhelming sometimes when you know things but you don't know why, or you feel things but it's not adding up to what you're seeing. And how do you navigate that, or do you see that at all?
Oh gosh, that's such a loaded question, but because there's a couple of factors to that. I think that again, I mentioned earlier that the things that I was interested in as a child are the things that I am still interested in now. And I found ways to foster those things very young with no resources. Um, Except for, a lot of imagination and sort of a lot of freedom to discover that. I think that my heart is broken daily when I look at people as adults, when I know that you can see little sparks of who they really are and things that they're interested in, but they've either been hurt or had really challenging circumstances growing up, or had fear or insecurities that kept them sort of from going down those rivers that were a part of who they were, growing up before life sort of hit them. And it makes me really sad, because I think that every single person, and I don't mean this in a rosy way, I do think that every single person is created with uniquely extraordinary, viewpoints and gifts that, when fostered in a healthy environment, really help them to become the part of the fabric of this world that they were meant to be. And when they don't, we get into all sort of conflict and hurt and just and sadness. Um, I see daily with students. I'm very careful about the students that I take on, um, because the work that I do as a teacher, especially in acting and in voice, it's very intimate, because in order to be an honest storyteller and tell the stories of people, whether it be fictional or not, it still is based in some sort of reality. You have to be honest and vulnerable with yourself, and be willing to do that externally. And so I interview parents before if it's a minor, um, to make sure that they're okay with that kind of work, and that we all can be comfortable enough to, like, be vulnerable and dive into work. And what eventually happens is students sort of, you become like a confidant to them. Now with minors, I'm like super careful, and my rule is always like, you can tell me things, but you need to know, I have like a 10-minute download time, or like a 5-minute download time, and then after that we like fully work. But I'm like, you can tell me something, but if it's anything that is like hurt or could hurt you, or could, I'm like, you need to know I'm going straight to your parents. So, sort of a rule. But I think that um, people who are, I don't work with a lot of young kids anymore. I sort of stopped that. I'm, getting older and sort of more crotchety, so I don't have the patience, if I'm being quite honest. But I think that the kids who really thrive and are the ones who either had sort of an inherent trait, even though they went through things, like, of being an overcomer. And so they're going to survive and thrive, and they found their way to their love and their passion, or they had a support system, whether it was a teacher that helped them, or whether it was a parent. It doesn't have to be a healthy, super healthy, supportive family with a bunch of resources. But someone in their life spoke into them, and I think that that's a huge game changer for people. And I think it's really important for people to feel seen. And I think that, obviously there are children who are young that maybe are geniuses at things that maybe don't need that sort of validation. Say someone who is more like, like a person who maybe is even autistic doesn't need necessarily the same validation that someone else might. But I think it's really important, and I see quite often that somebody took a moment to say something to them that validated their ability. And the earlier on that happens, a person who has that quality in them, they're going to go down that road and overcome it regardless, and find that. So I think it's really important, the things that we say to each other. Um, and I had a teacher when I was in the fifth grade. Again, I didn't have any resources, but I was like so determined. And I had like pictures of New York on my wall and from like pulled out of a magazine. And everybody's like, what is this child even like? I lived on a dirt road and we didn't have like running water in our house. Like it was like, but I just never doubted. I was like, I'm doing this. No man is going to stop me. I'm going to college, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's like, but I was sort of a hell-bent human coming out of the womb. I was like, I'm doing it regardless.
Well, you were
But I
speaking
did,
that life into yourself.
yes. But I did have I had a loving family. We didn't have any resources, but I had a loving family. But I had a fifth grade teacher who knew that I could sing. And there was a choir in Mobile. I think it was called Mobile Singing Children or something. And I lived way out, in North Mobile at the time. And she said, I want you to be a part of this choir. Well, my mom didn't even drive. She didn't have a license at the time. And I was like, there's no way that I can get there. And she took it upon herself to make sure that I could get to those rehearsals. And I did that for a month. And it was the first time I'd been a part of a choir with parts, and something sort of at that time felt really elevated. And it was a game changer for me. And I've never seen that teacher since. But I think about her every 6 months or every year of my life. And it changed my life. And then, I was in high school and I had teachers that, again, I didn't have resources. I didn't have money to be in the clubs, none of that. But I had a great friend group who were supportive of me. And I had teachers who were supportive of me. And I just kept pushing, and I would enter things that I knew I didn't have the resources to do, and somehow it would work out. And then, I ended up going to college and getting a full scholarship. And there were days when I would roll into the parking lot with no gas. My mom was at home, literally in a living room, in my living room in a hospital bed, dying. And I would go to school, and I had a voice teacher named Pam Beasley, who was not the voice teacher I was supposed to have. And she changed my life because she was this safe place every morning. And she sort of got me, really very supportive through that time in my life. And I've had those along the way. So I think as a teacher, I'm pretty tough as a teacher. I think any of my students will tell you that. But they don't doubt my honesty with them, and they don't doubt that I love them, and I will never lie to them about where I think their abilities are and where I think their strengths are. And I just think it's very important to speak into people that way. I had it done for me. I try to do that for others. I have the flip side of me that's sort of hot tempered and loose tongued in every side. I mean, frailties, that is me. But, I think that's really important. And I think that every person with the right nurturing, every single person, I see people in the street, I pass them every day in this city, passed out from drugs, from whatever, or so, and I look at them and I see that person. There's not a person I pass and I don't think that person has a purpose and a calling. And had they had some other different life or some other different circumstance or some other, what could they be? And I just say like this little one word prayer when I pass them, like, bless them. And I don't even know what that means to me. It's just like what I can get out, like somehow, that person matters. And so, I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, that's important. And that's a beautiful way to be, for sure.
Well, again, the miles of list of my frailties and faults are many. I have a terrible temper and everything else, but I do believe in people having a purpose.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
um Let's pivot a little bit here. Let's talk about you and Phil. So you told us
Yeah.
how y'all met
Yes.
in Fairhope and how the energies there on the past, though separate, it was that y'all were able to flow together. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with your husband and how that has evolved? Because there's obviously when you're married for as long as you've been married, it's not that peachy,
Oh,
just
yeah,
everything's the
no.
same. It's an evolution and a lot of choices that go along with that. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I think that um I had a good healthy fear. I mean, I was a very independent person. Very, like I said, I think sort of came out of the womb that way. And I definitely had a viewpoint of men in that, again, I'm very close to my father. This is not a bash session at all. But he was very traditional and old school, as his what was his father, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's funny because my two sisters and I have two sisters. One of them also passed of cancer, but I we all are very determined women. So my dad is like, oh my gosh, he got basically his payback for being sort of super controlling and traditional. um, but but I never really dreamt of being a wife or a mother. Um, and that was not my dream. My dream was to be able uh, to be self sufficient and to go after my passions, and there were many. And um, I, at the time, I dated a lot. I mean, but I, in the back of my mind, was always like, I'm not, going to get married. Um, but God had other plans, and I basically actually months before I met my husband, I had made this list, and I put one column that sort of said all the things very specifically that I wanted in a mate. Because it's not that I didn't want to even get married. I wasn't even thinking about it. It was just sort of like, I'm going to make this so hard that it won't happen. And then it was like so specific, even down to like the kind of career I wanted them to have, like their income, like all of that. Because at that point, like, I did not want to go marry some pauper for love. I'm sorry. That sounds harsh, but like, whatever. I lived that life, and I knew I had done for already.
I love it. I love it.
And so I just thought it was really important to like, people just sort of go off of their emotions and their heart. I think that's really dangerous when you're talking about a partner for the rest of your life. I think love is obviously staggeringly important and must be there, but it cannot be the only factor in a successful relationship. And and then I had made the list of all these specifics, and then I put one side, and then the other side I put all the things that I don't know to ask for, but that he should have. And I left it blank, and I was like, here, God, this is your side. And I left it blank, but I was like, that's all the things that I don't know to ask for, but that he should be, for me. And then I put it in my Bible, and I walked away and didn't think about it again. But I did put at the top of the list on my side that I wanted to be picked out of a crowd. Because every man that I had dated always seemed frustrated by my independence. And they were constantly comparing me to their mothers or other girls that they dated who sort of were less independent than me. Uh, and I didn't want to be compared. I refused to stand for that. And I just I don't even know why I phrased it that way. I just wanted to be picked out of a crowd. Like, I don't see anybody else but you. And then he saw me on the street corner at a Christmas parade.
That is fantastic.
So it's kind of, but I think that what is really important is that we both already had a pretty strong hold on who we were. Even though I was young, I'd lived a lot of life and been through a lot of experiences. And I think that that's really important. And I'm not saying that's the only way to go. I just think that for who I am and who he was, that was the right way for us. And I also knew very clearly, very soon, like a month in, that I was going to marry him. And it was a surprise to me. But I respected him before I loved him. And that was the game changer for me.
So important.
That was the game changer because I knew that I could trust him with my independence, which was hugely important to me. And so I respected him for that. And I didn't feel like he needed me to validate himself, and nor did I need him for that. And we are very much partners, and we've grown a really strong partnership. And it's not been perfect or easy, or it's been messy and all the other things. But we had some really strong foundations that have carried us through. And he's my best friend. We laugh a lot. He's the funniest person I know. We laugh hard. We still fight hard. I mean, we are not without, without fights or any of that stuff. Um, but I think we understand each other, and he's very supportive of who I am, and I'm very supportive of who he is. And we don't try to hinder that. And I think that's hugely important.
And how do y'all stay connected in your busy, you both are, like you said, very independent. You have very busy lives. How do the two of you, aside from career, aside from your children, how do the two of you stay connected as the couple that met on the streets of Fairhope?
Sometimes we don't.
Right?
Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's a mess. But that shows up, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute. We need to like take a beat and go to dinner or take a little trip somewhere and reconnect. And we will literally take a walk. Like, I'm like, you know what? You're home this weekend. Let's go for a walk in the morning, and we will talk and talk and talk. My husband can out talk me all day long. He is a talker if he wants to talk to you. But that is the way. Honestly, we reconnect is those small moments of just the simple things, of saying, let's go take a walk together. Let's go to dinner. We're talking. We love to talk and hang out. We really do. And we have a lot of fun together. And we love to be with our kids. We very, very much love to be with our kids. We presently are not big fans of taking vacations by ourselves. A short little overnight, but we don't like the big long, but that's just our preference. Um, but when getting away from the stress of moments and doing little things like that is really what has kept us afloat. But also him traveling and me also being very independent and having my own career, I think that has helped us.
Right. Sure.
I have no issue. Sometimes I'm like, "Well, I'm glad you're leaving for a trip. You are getting on my nerves." And he's the same way. He's like, "I'm glad I'm leaving for a work trip. I need a minute away from you." That's so okay to say that. That's like being human. And I think acknowledging that and also realizing that the stuff underneath the fairy tale is where the really good stuff is. And I think that's what matters. When you can make it through the really, really, really hard stuff, you come out on the other side, and that's where you really know what love is. Yeah.
For sure. I tell, when people ask me about stuff like that, I'm just like, my marriage with my husband now it's amazing. We have a strong testimony, like I said, but there's a lot of mess there. But I think the common denominator between us, and we both, and still to this day, we experience things, but at the end of the day, we constantly are choosing each other no matter what. It's the choice that we make in spite of the whirlwind around us, that we're choosing every day to love each other, even when we hate each other or feel like that. Like regardless, we've chosen each other. We're going to choose to love each other, and we're going to choose to get through this even when it sucks.
Yes.
And that sums it up right there, because there's a lot of amazing and there's a lot of suck, and you have to just you got to embrace them both, and still choose to love each other in spite of it all.
Yeah. And I think the glamorizing of relationships is much to our detriment. Not that we shouldn't feel love and butterflies. And actually, the initial love story of Philip and myself at the beginning was truly, truly like a fairy tale. There were many aspects about it that were pretty magical. But very shortly on, 6 months in, my sister was diagnosed with cancer. She was my best friend. I became her full time care. I was caring for her along with we had a very dear friend that was helping with her. She passed at 33. But that was like 6 months into our marriage, and my husband was with a whole new team, and it was hellacious. I mean, we had a really hard time at that team, and not easy. That was really, really hard on our marriage, and that was all very early on. And I think that what you said, it's very true. It is choosing each other every day, and also just sort of sitting still for a minute when you're having those days where you don't really like each other, and just going, okay, I'm going to let this pass. I don't know if this is like perimenopause or like it's that time of the month. I don't know what's happening, but you're really getting on my nerves right now. But I know that, like, the character of who you are, and that the decent man that you are, and your integrity and the way that you are with my children, like, there'll never be anybody better than that for my children, and even for me. And that's, like I said, that's where the real foundations of love are. Yeah.
We were both in Fairhope, and we hadn't actually met formally. And I had so many people, including people that you have worked with, friends, I think people that just kind of went in and out of anyway, several people. They've like, do you know Dorothy? Do you know Dorothy Savage? I'm like, yeah, I know her, but we haven't, I don't know her, but I
Right.
know her. And they're like, you guys remind me so much of each other. Like, and I'm like, really? Okay. Well, and when hearing you tell your story and going through things and your take on things and just your raw honesty, I'm like, okay, I get it. So to all those people who said that, thank you.
Well, that's lovely.
Okay, so one of the things that that I really enjoy seeing it on your posts and different things is when you talk about your healthy living and you talk about things that a lot of people aren't talking about. I saw a post that you were talking about specific like tampons and things like that. So what led you down the road of being able to? I think a lot of people can't realize it because they just don't want to admit the fact that there's bad stuff out there and that we're surrounded by it and that people would actually not care enough to keep us safe. But that's the truth of it. So what opened your eyes to that, and how is that helping you navigate, with your own home and raising your kids?
I think this journey for me started way back again because of my mother's illness. We started very early on, back before there was the internet or any of that. She worked. We used like echinacea and herbs and juicing when she was going through chemotherapy, and so we started down that road with her. Uh, Sort of non-traditional. That's when you had to go to the library and read a book, and those types of things to try to figure out natural remedies to deal with sort of assisting with your healing with cancer. And so I had a foundation in that growing up. And then when my sister, who was diagnosed, she was 29, I think, when she was diagnosed. She also was very much into working for the holistic route. She was diagnosed with late stage ovarian cancer, very young, 29 years old with two small children. And we were inseparable, my sister and I were. And so I went down that journey with her, and she went to like this juicing camp thing in Georgia where, you did nothing but juice. And then we went to a place in Mexico that was supposed to be this, over the top holistic, and the hyperbaric chambers and all this stuff, the red light therapy, all which are commonly used now. Um, and much more accessible that at the time you couldn't. And I mean, we went to this clinic. I mean, that's a whole story in its own, and it was sort of defunct and not what was um not what was advertised. And here I am with, she was very, very ill at the time, and had not started chemo. and was going totally the non-traditional route. Honor, careful with that water, honey. Um, she was totally not going the traditional route, and she was very sick. And we, at one point, ended up that I thought, and we were doing all these therapies there. And I thought, I'm not going to get her home. I'm not going to get her back across the border alive. I mean, it was really, really bad. So much to the point that we ended up in Tijuana and they wanted me to do a blood transfusion. I was like, there's no way in, you know what? I'm doing a blood transfusion in a dirty little place in Tijuana. We're going home. And so, but we went down that road. And so I I have, I mean, this is a different podcast, but that's a podcast for another day. But I have a lot of sort of conspiracy theories about, you know, health and the C word and all of that stuff. So, but I think it's big business, and I think that the powers that be, ultimately money rules the world, and um, I don't think that the organizations in our country, sort of give a rat's, behind about our health. And I think when it comes to approving drugs and things and cosmetics and our cleaning products, I think they know that these things are dangerous and they calculate a risk, and I don't think they care. And
Well, and one industry feeds the other.
yeah, one industry feeds the other. So I think I don't trust any of these industries at all, including most of our healthcare system. I'm extremely, I don't mind saying, jaded when it comes to that. And so I think that you have to be very, very proactive in taking your health into your own hands. And I think that you have to dig pretty deep to get to the truth. And sometimes it feels almost impossible to find. But I do think that when you get back to the basics, and what's really hard is that even if you want to juice and be vegan and only eat fresh produce, our food supply in itself is so corrupt and poisoned from the ground up that we are fighting a really intense battle. So, and I also honor my daughter has extreme allergies. And has, she began to sort of develop early on some sort of strange rashes and would get staph really easy and all sorts of things. And so I started just troubleshooting everywhere under the sun for that. And so it became a necessity for many reasons. And then when you start digging and you realize that most of our clothing is made of plastic, and you realize that, particularly for females, we are test subjects for garbage products and material, and we are a massive, part of the economy, and they play off of that. And now it's gotten so deep and so young with our children, where our little girls think that they have to have all of these scents and lotions, and that, go to Sephora, and these things are disrupting our endocrine system, and they're disrupting our female. We have the highest rate of infertility ever, and everybody's walking around going, oh no, I don't know what's happening. And we know what's happening, and big pharma knows what's happening. And so that's why, because it's life or death. I don't think you can afford to not look at those things. And, you know, probably sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, here comes Dorothy with her like EMF protector on her phone and, making my own nut milk. I don't care.
Okay,
I
now
do
I get
not
even
care.
more why people have compared me to you.
Yes. Yeah. I don't care because,
Me
and
either.
it's really hard too, because I have a daughter who's a teenager and she wants to like, wear all those things, and I'm like, do you see how you can't hardly breathe after you use that lotion? Do you see? And it's like, it's sort of, it's hard to say. I know those bottles are beautiful, but look, if you take the pink shiny bottle off and you see it in the lab or the chemical plant that they make that stuff in, you'll see that everybody is covered in hazmat suits mixing it as before they put it in the bottle because of the allergies and the illnesses it causes. And she has come to it, but it sort of is like, it's a bummer. as a kid in this day and age. And so I really would love to see more companies step forward to to combat that, especially with social media. We have every little girl that's going out, not to mention the impact of thinking you have to go spend $1,000 at Sephora to feel valid. I mean, that's a whole other, you know, issue. But I get off into the health thing because it is life or death, and it's longevity and it's fertility and it's even our young men are feeling that they've got to do face masks and all these things, and I'm like, little boys are just like stinky in puberty, like it's fine. I'd rather them be that way than over polished and puffed and making themselves sick for later on when they're very youthful, immune system can no longer fight all of these things. So it's life or death. That's why.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And you're going to have to come back and we're going to have to dive into this for real because it is very real. And I think that it's a hard truth that people don't want to see because it's inconvenient. It's very inconvenient and it's uncomfortable. But
And
like you said,
expensive.
it's life or death. And right, and expensive.
And
But it is life or
overwhelming.
death.
Yes. And people feel very overwhelmed. Listen, it is not judgment. I'm like, if you're living off of Lucky Charms and, Coke, I'm not judging you. I get it. You're probably doing the best you can and working 3 jobs just to pay for that. Um, so it feels really overwhelming. And then as a parent, you feel like a failure because all of a sudden it's one more thing you have to try to figure out and you don't know how to do it. So it's really hard.
What's one unconventional piece of advice you could give people that are wanting to either understand that path better or make changes to their own path?
I think if people could learn to shut off the messages that we get, which is very challenging. It's a challenge for me. This is not a judgmental statement. Learn to shut off the messages and get quiet and listen to themselves and pay attention to your health and stop looking for, not that pills and medicine, they can absolutely be totally instrumental and useful. And there are wonderful people in the medical field. But I think if you simplify and go back to the basics is a great way to start, a great place to start. Go back to the basics, simplify your life a bit, and you'll start to sort of see. I mean, TMI, but I was having like a couple years ago, I was having all these yeast infections and the blah 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 blah, and I was like, "What is all of this? Like, I'm falling apart, urinary tract infection, all this." They just kept putting me on all these antibiotics, and finally, I was like, "Nope, this is not happening." And I went on the road, started realizing about activewear, all those things, ditched every piece of Lululemon. Yes, I'm calling you out, Lululemon. I ditched every piece of that I owned, went to totally water, went to got rid of Diet Cokes, any soda, anything like that, caffeine, and went to vegetarian and gone. Haven't had an issue since. And 100% cotton undergarments changed my life. And so I would say simplify and get back to basics, and shut off outward messaging and sit a minute with yourself and pay attention to your body, and really, we have a lot of inherent common sense.
Yes, we do.
And I think that we don't know how to just listen to ourselves and get still. And that is a challenge for me. It's a challenge for everyone. And I think that's just really important is sort of simplifying and learning to be quiet and listen. You learn a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. That's great advice. Is there one thing that you have, like my I have a couple, well, I have a couple of go-tos, but staples in my house, like I have the 10 ppm colloidal silver, I have the oregano oil, and I use castor oil. Like that's just 3 of my little staple things I don't leave home without. What are some of the staple things in your home?
I cannot live without. I use castor oil for everything. I also use the like the Castile soap. I got rid of all the perfume stuff that way. I use it for hair, for everything. And then I use the castor oil wraps. Have been really really useful. Getting rid of any artificial dairies, anything like that. That's all gone. We have a little milk maker. We just make nut milk. My kids don't have allergies to those, so that's good. But that's been fabulous. I use essential oils every single day. But they're the expensive, highly concentrated ones that are hard, not the cheaper gimmicks. Um, I use ghee. I'm vegetarian, but I use ghee to cook with. And we don't use white sugar. Um, and so, yeah, simple things that aren't sexy. And that's the hard part because there's no fun, cute marketing around that. You know, it's nothing really sexy about, a bottle of, Dr. Bronner's Castile soap. It's like, it's not cute. Um, but I do buy cute jars and things to put those in, and that helps.
Yeah, it does. That's so funny. Oh my goodness. Well, Dorothy, thank you so much. Thank you for being here today and for being just real and honest and sharing with us a little bit about your life and how you have navigated through to where you are now.
Well, thank you for having me, and I think it's really important, to just talk about things and like this. And I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on this morning. And congratulations on doing this. I think it's really wonderful.
Thank you, and I would love to have you back. I want to talk about some of those conspiracies and and dive deeper into how you navigate through the world of healthy living. That would be awesome.
Great. Would love
Okay,
that.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing your time with us today. Dorothy has shown us today that being a triple threat isn't just about juggling. It's about aligning your gifts with your values and your motherhood with your mission and your lifestyle with what actually brings life. She's reminded us that being whole doesn't mean being perfect. It means being present. That protecting your home's frequency is just as important as performing on any stage. And that sometimes the most powerful role we ever play is the ones that we play off script, inside the rhythm of our own lives. So to every woman listening, may you trust your voice, guard your peace, and remember that the spotlight is optional, but your light, that's unshakable. Keep showing up for your family, for your body, for your becoming. And as always, stay grounded, stay golden, and stay unbridled. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, stay unbridled.